there'll be a fewer showers for the Midlands today. That being said, there will still be a few which could catch you out, so make sure you're prepared. In the northeast of England, things should stay drier. The very strong winds we saw earlier in the day will be easing with plenty of sunshine on the cards here. Temperatures a touch down on average, though, as you can see. What about Scotland? Showers will feed in across Scotland, some of these falling as sleet or even snow, especially over higher ground. Southeastern parts of the country have the best chance of staying dry. Now to Northern Ireland, showers and blustery winds are expected. Notice, whilst it will be chilly today, it's going to turn milder as we go throughout the next few days. So the overall picture, cloud and persistent rain is going to push into the northwest to leave a damp end to the day here. That's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick, Christys and Mercy Muroki on your TV and on your radio. And we're here all the way through until midday with a massive show to kickstart your week.
Yes, and we want to hear from you, as always, so make sure you get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those throughout the programme. But first, let's give you the latest news.
A very good morning. It's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The government is expected to announce a U-turn over compulsory COVID vaccines for NHS workers. The Health Secretary is reportedly going to scrap the policy over fears it could lead to a major staffing crisis. Critics are also calling for the change because the Omicron variant of coronavirus is milder than previous variants. Schools are closed and thousands are without power today after back-to-back storms battered parts of the UK. 2 people were killed by falling trees in 90-mile-an-hour winds at the weekend, including a 9-year-old boy. A yellow weather warning remains in place for Scotland and the north of England. Storm Malik was followed by Storm Corrie just 24 hours later. People in Tyne and Wear say the damage has been shocking.
You would never ever think in a million years that would happen, especially waiting at stone. But it shows you how strong wind is.
Trees down, gable end, down Sion Terrace is gone.
We haven't been in the northeast, we've just come to get used to it really, but these last few years the weather seems to be just getting worse and worse.
Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood is still in custody after being arrested on suspicion of rape and assault. Police say they were made aware of images and videos posted on social media by women reporting incidents of physical violence. Manchester United has suspended the player, announcing he won't train or play for the Premier League club until further notice. New evidence shows the suspect in the Madeleine McCann investigation worked at the holiday apartments in Portugal shortly before the 3-year-old disappeared in 2007. A documentary that's airing tonight on German TV reveals the 44-year-old paedophile known as Christian B carried out repairs at the resort. The man, who's currently in prison for rape, denies any involvement. A Brexit freedoms bill, which the government claims will cut £1 billion of red tape for UK businesses, is set to be brought forward. It affects how EU laws, which were kept for legal continuity after Brexit, are handled. Downing Street says the bill will ensure changes can be made easily and allow the country to capitalise on Brexit freedoms more quickly. The Defence Secretary has called for tensions over Ukraine to be de-escalated during a visit to Hungary at the start of a diplomatic tour. Ben Wallace was speaking amid efforts to stave off war as the Russian Navy carried out exercises in the Norwegian Sea. The government is due to unveil new measures making it easier to sanction Russian interests if the country invades Ukraine, a move Moscow has described as alarming. Meanwhile, the US has requested a meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss Russia's build-up of troops on the Ukrainian border. The charity GambleAware says up to 1 million women are at risk of harm from gambling. Their research suggests that among women experiencing high levels of harm, 2 in 5 may not seek help, and many women increase gambling over the winter months. Lisa Walker became addicted to gambling after winning a 6-figure sum in Southend in a casino when she was 29.
I lost my house, I ended up homeless, and I ended up in a hostel with my 2 children through gambling. So I just want to say a big thank you to GambleAware for raising, this serious subject of women and gambling harms. And to anybody that's out there that's suffering, please don't suffer in silence.
More passengers could soon receive financial compensation for delayed domestic flights if their plane arrives at its destination more than 1 hour late. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, has proposed plans to reduce the payout threshold from airlines to passengers from a 3-hour delay to 1. Spotify is working on adding advisory warnings to podcasts that discuss COVID-19, redirecting users to coronavirus facts. It follows criticism over the platform hosting Joe Rogan's Experience podcast, which has aired anti-vaccine views. Neil Young and Joni Mitchell have pulled music from the platform, and the Duke of Duchess of Sussex have also raised concerns over misinformation. Footballer Christian Eriksen has signed for Premier League club Brentford 7 months after suffering a cardiac arrest on the pitch while playing for Denmark. The 29-year-old, who's been fitted now with an internal defibrillator, hasn't played since he collapsed at Euro 2020. The former Tottenham midfielder has signed a 6-month deal. You are up to date now here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV and radio. And we're here until midday, bringing you the day's top stories, our opinions, and most importantly, your views as well.
Yes, well, national insurance is set to rise in April despite strong backlash from some MPs. We'll be talking this through in detail in just a few moments' time with financial journalist Jasmine Birtles to find out exactly what this means for the money, or lack of, frankly, in your pocket.
Yes, and new information has been revealed in the continued investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. We'll be discussing the latest in that investigation with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, very shortly.
Yes, don't miss that. And the government is expected to announce a U-turn on mandatory COVID jabs for NHS and care workers after the Omicron variant is found to be milder than first feared. We'll be joined by our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Do you think this is a good idea? Lots of you have been giving very strong views about mandatory jabs.
Yes, and keep those views coming in because we're here with much more of your views across the programme, and get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick's going to give his views on Liberal governments turning to authoritarianism in the fight against COVID.
The thousands of truckers who formed a convoy and drove to the Canadian capital to protest draconian COVID laws represent more than just a protest movement. They're part of a revolution against tyranny, a tyranny being committed by people who claim to stand for liberal values. There is a real problem with liberalism at the moment, and that problem is that the people in power who call themselves liberals are fast becoming totalitarian. It's Animal Farm in action, isn't it? Justin Trudeau, a man who claims to be woker than woke, well, we all remember him saying it's people kind, don't we? Not mankind, for example. Yet this is a man who's worn blackface and who is very comfortable running roughshod over his population's civil liberties. All in the name, of course, of being kind. Not content with banning the unvaccinated from public transport and working in federal departments, he's forcing truckers travelling between the US and Canada to quarantine. And he called the protesters a small fringe minority. Yet when the convoy arrived in Ottawa, he and his family fled and went into hiding. It's either something much larger than a fringe movement, or he's the kind of man who legs it from a small group of protesters. And if it's the latter, I'm not sure he's the kind of person that you'd want leading your country, is he? I've been amazed at the media coverage, or should I say lack of it. The BBC has a report online right now with the headline, "Truckers Cause Chaos." I don't remember seeing those kind of headlines of the largely peaceful protests in America, where there was looting, buildings set on fire, and full-blown riots. It's not just the ultra-authoritarian rules being brought in by the supposedly liberal leaders. It's also the campaign of demonisation against people who hold different beliefs to them. It's Soviet-esque. And it's not just Canada. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand holds herself up as this uber-liberal, yet she's behaved, in my opinion, like a tin pot dictator drunk on power. New Zealand has had some of the harshest lockdowns. She seems gleeful, kind of maniacally so, really, at press conferences, as she says that the unvaccinated will essentially not be allowed to do anything. She's even in the process of banning cigarettes, for goodness sake. New Zealanders are now not allowed to travel back to their home country to see their families in some cases. And on top of that, an unvaccinated pregnant journalist has been forced to seek help from the Taliban, in Afghanistan, because Ardern won't let her come home. Charlotte Bellis discovered that she was pregnant a short time after gaining international attention in 2021 for questioning Taliban leaders about their treatment of women and girls. She's due to give birth in May. Well, giving birth in Afghanistan can often be a death sentence in itself, can't it? Frankly, given the country has one of the highest maternal mortality rates, I should say, in the world, and so can living under the Taliban. It's a deadly scenario all round, isn't it? Something is seriously wrong here. Joe Biden's another one. This super progressive guy is also content with totalitarian COVID laws and swearing at members of the free press. The European Union, supposedly this fluffy bastion of democracy, is also content with many of its member states bringing in mandatory jabs and never-ending cycles of lockdowns and much, much more. But people are waking up. It's not just the Canadian truckers, it's people all over the world. They're waking up to the Orwellian reality that just because their leaders might drape themselves in a rainbow flag, claim to be radical feminists, take the knee and say they're woke defenders of human rights and all things good in the world, doesn't mean they actually are. Sometimes, in fact, they're the very opposite of that. Yeah, I find it astonishing, really. You know, some of these people in the world right now that supposedly are, the most progressive, the most liberal or whatever, have actually introduced, some of the most draconian rules.
Yes, it has been incredible to watch. And a GoFundMe page in this particular incident for these truckers has actually raised over £4 million, so over $5.4 million at the moment. So they have incredible support, actually, amongst loads of Canadians. And in fact, that's despite, I think, 80% of the eligible population in Canada are actually double jabbed.
Yeah.
Canadian Trucking Alliance estimates that 85 to 90% of the truckers are vaccinated. So it's not even about them opposing vaccinations per se. Most of them, vast majority of them, are actually double jabbed. They're just saying, hang on a minute, there's an injustice here in forcing these rules upon people when there should be actually a freedom of choice there. People who choose not to be vaccinated should not be treated radically different and have their right to work infringed upon because of these rules, which you call draconian.
And it's the language used as well by a lot of these people. They're a small fringe movement, or they're dangerous, or whatever. It's demonising these people. And also it's the language in a lot of the media as well, like with these truckers. Now, truckers cause chaos. was a protest. Not being funny, but Extinction Rebellion caused chaos. They were
It's not even a protest, really, at this point, isn't it? It's just a bunch of trucks.
Well, there's a lot of people there, but it's still, it's you know, what would you call it? I don't know. It's a convoy. It's a demonstration, isn't it?
It's barely even, you know, a protest in how we would imagine a protest. So it's unjustified.
You look at some of the things that happen in America, you know, there is that infamous CNN report, I think, isn't there, of, you know, buildings on fire in the background, largely peaceful protests. I mean, goodness knows what they'd call it if it really kicked off, you know?
Yeah, indeed. Well, get in touch with your views. What do you think about all of that? We know last week lots of you were getting in touch, asking us to discuss this, and we will actually be discussing this a bit more a bit later on in the show, so get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And now, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and Chancellor Rishi Sunak have jointly pledged to go ahead with the £12 billion national insurance hike. That's despite MPs' pleas to scrap the rise.
Well, national insurance is expected to increase in April, although Boris Johnson and the Chancellor insist they are tax-cutting Conservatives. They say they must go ahead with the plan. Well, joining us now is Jasmine Birtles, founder of Money Magpie and financial journalist and a regular here at GB News. Thank you very much for joining us. So, look, a lot of people, I think, were holding out hope, weren't they, really, of Boris Johnson rowing back on this, and it's not happening, is it?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly one who's spoken about how really it is not helpful to add to people's financial burdens right now. April is looking like a cliff edge, frankly, because we've got the energy price cap going up. We've got extra taxation. Essentially, it's a kind of a stealth tax because they've frozen the rate at which you start to pay the actual number at which you start to pay income tax, and people's incomes are going up. And here we have a 1.25% addition to workers' taxation. I mean, you know, national insurance is a tax by another name. So, for example, if you're on a salary of £20,000, you're going to pay an extra £130 per year, which, if you're on £20,000 a year, is a lot of money. You know, if you're on £100,000, you'll pay an extra £1,130 per year. This is really not helpful, I think.
And I did want to ask you about that because, as you mentioned, you know, those figures, people on particularly 30,000 to 50,000 in that gap of earners, they're estimated to be the hardest hit, whereas the people who are earning 100,000 are expected to be the least hit. And I just wonder, because Boris Johnson has called this a progressive tax, how can they possibly justify that? Is there no other way they could have raised this money? Because it's clearly, unequivocally not progressive.
Well, absolutely. I agree. It isn't progressive. And I'm very surprised that they're calling themselves the low tax party. I mean, they should be. That's the idea of conservatism, at least part of the idea. But no, I'm not seeing low taxes. Of course, we understand that the government has borrowed insane amounts of money. I mean, we are over 400 billion in debt now. So of course they need to claw the money back, but it's a question of when, how much, etc. And I would say that it would be better to support growth, really, really support growth, because the more the economy grows, the more people are making, the more just tax they're going to pay. They're going to pay more VAT. They're going to pay more income tax. So that, I would say, for this year is the more important thing than trying to claw back these bits and pieces from people who are already struggling, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've just done a piece before about people, leaders indeed, being the opposite of what they say they are, right? So, you know, Boris Johnson, a low tax conservative, and here we are, you know. But in reality, how many people do you think this could plunge into poverty?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, already we had, before the lockdowns started, we had over 10.5 million people who were financially vulnerable, 10.5 million. By the end of the lockdowns, it was 14.5 million. So I am patron of a couple of debt charities, and I'm hearing from people there that they are expecting a tsunami of debt problems, bankruptcies, etc. I mean, they're already very, very busy. So I think it's probably, you know, another few million, honestly, another couple of million are likely to come here because of, you know, we're going to have also rising interest rates. So anybody borrowing, they're going to have a problem. We're already seeing, I mean, we've been hearing from Jack Munro about the price of food, just basics of food that they're dealing with. plus energy bills going up, and of course petrol. It's the basics really that we're looking at that are having that are going up in price. So adding on national insurance to the lower earners as well as the higher earners is really not helpful right now.
No, not at all. Is this just a result of what we did in terms of COVID? Is this a result of what happened during lockdown? The fact is that because of the measures that we took, we're now as a nation skint and we need more tax.
Yeah, basically. I mean, as you know, from about 2008, we have been printing money. But in the last 2 years, we have been printing it like it's going out of fashion. Not as bad as America. America is astounding at levels of money printing, quantitative easing, as it's properly called. I call it printing money. And that has to be taken back. We have borrowed all over the place so that we have billions to pay back. So, it is difficult for the government. I do understand. I mean, I would not want to be in Rishi Sunak's position because he has very little wiggle room at all. But still, I think that there are ways of bringing money back in. And one of the biggest, as I say, I think, is to really underpin growth, underpin the business, underpin the economy so that we are producing more, we are spending more, and that will bring in more VAT money, more income tax money.
Well, Jasmine Birtles, thank you so much for going through that with us this morning, founder of Money Magpie and financial journalist. Thank you. I think it's an insult, isn't it, to a lot of people on those low income bands. 20,000, it's nothing really, is it, trying to survive, especially if you have a family. And then add to that, now you have to give more tax to the government.
But a lot of people as well, let's say you start off, and I think my first job probably was about 15.5 grand, and that's local journalism for you. But but then when you start to get maybe onto 30 or whatever, or 40, you've started to work your way up, and then now you're just being cut off at the knees, aren't you?
Absolutely. Well, after the break, we'll be talking to our home and security editor, Mark White, about the revelation that the prime suspect in the Madeleine McCann disappearance case repeatedly worked at the hotel holiday apartment in Portugal where she went missing. Stay with us for that. That's after the weather.
Hello again. Storm Corrie is clearing away, but it's still windy out there. Cold wind as well, slowly easing through the day. Sunny spells for many, certainly in the east. A few showers in the west. There is that storm system that brought the damage across Scotland overnight. The low pressure heading away, but bringing some very strong winds to Germany and Belgium today. Behind it, the isobars slowly opening up, but as I said, still quite a cold and brisk wind blowing out there, and blowing showers into Wales, west and north of Scotland, some patchy rain coming into the west of Northern Ireland as well. Elsewhere, most places dry, just 1 or 2 showers in southwest England, and many eastern areas dry, fine and sunny. But it is cold, and it feels especially cold in the east where the winds are stronger. It feels closer to freezing when you add on the wind. Now, we're going to see a bit more rain trickling into Scotland and Northern Ireland through this evening. That will slowly spread its way southwards into parts of the Midlands and Wales by morning. So a cloudy night, a damp night, and things turning milder as well. Early in the night, we could see temperatures down to 3 or 4 degrees, but by dawn, most places up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So a mild day to come on Tuesday. Quite a grey start with outbreaks of rain, and it will be windy again across northern Scotland. Now, not as windy as through the weekend, but we could still see gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour, and because of those recent storms, that could still also bring some disruption. So there is a yellow warning in place across northern Scotland, some brightness across southern Scotland, northern England, and look at the temperatures up to 11 to maybe 13 Celsius, so really quite mild. Stays blustery across northern Scotland with further showers through the evening. It stays damp across Wales, Northern Ireland, parts of the Midlands with rain and drizzle here and there. Clearer skies again across southern Scotland and northeast England. The winds will continue to be a feature of the weather this week, although not as strong as at the weekend. Fairly mild for the next few days, but a colder spell on Friday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. It is just about to go 10:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on GB News live on your TV and your radio.
Yes, now new evidence in the Madeleine McCann investigation revealed that the prime suspect worked at holiday apartments in Portugal prior to the 3-year-old's disappearance on the 3rd of May 2007. For more on this latest development, our Home and Security editor Mark White joins us now. Good morning, Mark. Just bring us up to date with the latest developments here.
Yeah, this is a chap who's known as Christian B. He's in jail in northern Germany, having been jailed for drug offences and also convicted of the rape of an American tourist in Praia da Luz, the resort in the Algarve, where Madeleine McCann was before her disappearance on the 3rd of May 2007. Now, he was named a couple of years ago by German authorities as their prime suspect. They have a lot of circumstantial evidence, not quite enough to put before the courts, but a lot of evidence that says that he was in that area at the time. He has a prior history of offences, including sexual offences involving children. There is enough in the way of evidence that tells them, the German authorities, that he is their prime suspect. Well, the latest evidence comes in the form of a documentary that's going out this evening in Germany on Sat1, on the satellite broadcaster in Germany. They have spent some considerable time amassing more in the way of information on Christian B. In particular, they've spoken to someone who knew him and who has not as yet spoken to the police or the prosecution authorities in Germany, but has confirmed that Christian B was a handyman, worked for a company, a third company that worked and did sort of repair jobs, odd jobs around the hotel complexes in Praia da Luz, including, and this is key, including the Ocean Club, which is the apartment complex that Madeleine McCann was staying at in May of 2007, and indeed was apparently carrying out repair work, doing odd jobs at that complex in the weeks and months before her abduction.
Does this heap a bit more scorn on the original Portuguese investigation then? Because I mean, it's been criticised strongly, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a complete bungled operation from the very start. They missed some key clues, the way in which they spoke to people who were there at the time, the evidence that they did or didn't amass in terms of proper forensics of the area really handicapped the subsequent investigations that have been carried out by the Metropolitan Police, which incidentally still has this tandem operation that's been going for more than a decade now, has cost more than £11 million. And of course, the German investigation, which sprung from information that was given to the German authorities in 2017 by a former associate of Christian B, who said that they were quite alarmed by almost a confession that he made over some drinks in a pub when he said he knew what happened to Madeleine McCann. Now, in addition to this information that says that Christian B was working in and around that hotel complex around about the time that Madeleine disappeared, the documentary team have also carried out more detailed cell site analysis of the mobile phone that Christian B had. Now, the police had already carried out some cell site evidence that showed his mobile phone was in use on the evening that Madeleine disappeared, and it was in the Praia de Luz area. Well, the German documentary have narrowed that down further to show that he was only a 5-minute drive away from the ocean complex at the time that Madeleine disappeared.
Wow, OK.
Have the parents of Madeleine McCann, have they said anything at all about these latest developments we've had?
They've not made any public comment. They are being kept up to date, of course, with the ongoing investigation. The British authorities regularly keep them up to date. I mean, this, for them, clearly is difficult, as it has been throughout the past almost 15 years now. In fact, on the 3rd of May this year, it will be 15 years since this 3-year-old girl disappeared. It is incredible to believe that.
It is, isn't it, actually? Wow. I mean, it's one of the biggest stories ever.
In our lifetime, I think.
Definitely. It really is. But, Mark, thank you for all of that. And obviously, so what do we know what time that documentary's going out? We don't know.
It's going out this evening. I don't have an exact time, but there will no doubt be some clips on the wire services from that documentary when it goes out. It's certainly, on the face of it, seems to be some compelling new evidence.
Good stuff, Mark. Thank you very, very much. Mark White, our home security editor there.
Yes, now let's go to some of your views. Lots of you have been getting in touch, particularly about that story about the government. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak will have said they'll go ahead with that planned hike, really. Bill gets in touch. He says thousands of families have to choose between eat or heat. And we always hear that, isn't it? And it's particularly pertinent this year. We know that the gas prices are going up, energy prices, this NI tax going up, cost of living. So I think that phrase is particularly pertinent this year, 2022.
No, it is massive, actually. It couldn't really come at a worse time. We are going to be coming on later to, apparently anyway, a potential U-turn on the mandatory jabs, of course, for health workers and care workers. Delighted to see the government are looking to scrap mandatory COVID vaccinations for NHS workers. However, they're also looking to scrap it for all other health and social care workers. We'll put that to our guests when we get to them. I work in a residential care home for older people and I'm very conscious of the current shortage of care workers. That's from Elizabeth, and that's a massive point, isn't it? Look, I think at the end of the day, you have to face facts. If you're confronted by a reality of you haven't got enough staff to run these things.
Yeah, which is why I think we've said this before a long time ago, a few weeks ago. They would have had to, they were never going to go through with it. That's what I assume, because you can't. How can you lose tens of thousands of workers? Ian says, come on, guys, give us a break. Start talking about all the waste that goes on 24/7. Claw the billions back from fraud and incompetency, and that would reduce the tax burden. And it's a great point, isn't it? Because they do waste billions and billions of pounds every single year, which is why when I see them putting taxes, increasing taxes on some of the lowest paid people in society, I don't think it's morally justifiable, given the level of waste that goes on in the NHS as well, which is what all this is for, supposedly.
I mean, Ian sounds a lot like the conversation I had with my accountant yesterday, actually, where it was just desperation, really, on his part. Like, stop it, please. All of the waste. Think of the waste. But here we are, alas. Anyway, lots of you as well discussing what we spoke about earlier. Now, the Canadian truckers thing. Now, we did do it bits and parts, I think, over the last week, really. We certainly did it on Friday. But a lot of you were getting in touch and actually, frankly, hammering me on Twitter for do more on it, do more on it. So I thought, OK, all right, stop it, I'll do more on it. And so I did. And then it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of you now are getting to say, a lot of these people who say they're liberals, right? Say you Trudeau's. How do you say Trudeau?
Trudeau. That's how I say it.
Trudeau. And a lot of these people who say that they're these uber liberals, you're Jacinda Ardern, Well, actually, hang on a minute. They're behaving in a very totalitarian way a lot of the time, a very draconian way, seemingly with very little regard for civil liberties. And actually, the way that they defend it, or the way that they get away with it a lot of the time, is they go, well, let's just put this rainbow flag over me, let's talk about women's rights, and we'll say that we're doing this out of a need to be kind to people. But actually, in reality, they're not. And lots of you getting in touch. Elizabeth, another Elizabeth, loads of Elizabeths this morning. You could also have singled out Angela Merkel and European values. Yes, absolutely.
Austria is bringing in...
Austria, notoriously not the most liberal of countries, though, to be fair.
But it's bringing in one of the most barbaric, I suppose. It's going to force people, basically, to get a vaccine. It's going to be literally illegal to not have had a vaccine, right?
Absolutely ridiculous, isn't it?
They're going to charge people.
No, of course it is. And I think this is it, At what point do people look through it, and start going, well, just because you say you're liberal, just because you say that you are a defender of civil liberties, a bastion of human rights and otherwise dark and bleak existence, well, facts speak for themselves at the end of the day.
The actions do speak louder than their words. Mandy here says, I feel so emotional looking at what's unfolding in Canada. It's wonderful. This needs to happen in Europe. Convoys heading to all the major cities like Rome, where the unjabbed are set to lose all their civil liberties to these totalitarian tin pot dictators.
I think this is a real demonstration of people power. And it's, again, the language used. Oh, this is a small fringe minority. These idiots, these small-minded people, these dangerous people. Well, hang on a minute. There's a lot of them, right?
There's a lot of them. If that's massive support.
If that's a small marginal group, they've managed to raise something like $4 or $5 million. It may probably even more now.
Probably more.
Probably gone up since we've been on air, right? And then they've got this massive convoy of Americans and Canadians and everyone else. They're gathering us. It's such a small minority of people that Justin Trudeau had to flee with his family. All right, mate, come on.
Well, keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But after the break, we'll be discussing the news that Health Secretary Sajid Javid is reportedly set to announce a vaccine mandate U-turn for healthcare workers. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date on GB News. The government's expected to announce a U-turn over compulsory COVID vaccines for NHS workers. The Health Secretary is reportedly going to scrap the policy over fears that it could lead to a major staffing crisis. Critics are also calling for the change because the Omicron variant of coronavirus is milder than previous ones. Schools are currently closed and thousands of people are without power after back-to-back storms battered parts of the UK. 2 people were killed by falling trees in 90-mile-an-hour winds at the weekend. One of those was a 9-year-old boy. A yellow weather warning remains in place for Scotland and the north of England. Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood is still in custody after being arrested on suspicion of rape and assault. Police said they were made aware of the images and videos posted on social media by a woman reporting incidents of physical violence. Manchester United has suspended the player, announcing he won't train or play for the Premier League club until further notice. New evidence shows the suspect in the Madeleine McCann investigation worked at the holiday apartments in Portugal shortly before the 3-year-old disappeared in 2007. A documentary airing tonight on German TV reveals 44-year-old paedophile, known only as Christian B, carried out repairs at the resort. The man, who's currently in prison for rape, denies any involvement. The government is planning to bring forward the Brexit Freedoms Bill, which it claims will cut £1 billion of red tape for UK businesses. It affects how EU laws, which were kept for legal continuity after Brexit, are handled. Downing Street says the bill will allow the country to capitalise on Brexit freedoms more quickly. Footballer Christian Eriksen has signed for Premier League club Brentford 7 months after suffering a cardiac arrest on the pitch while playing for Denmark. The 29-year-old, who's been fitted now with an internal defibrillator, hasn't played since he collapsed playing at Euro 2020. The former Tottenham midfielder has signed a 6-month deal. You are now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. A short break now, and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:38 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki and Patrick Christys on GB News live on your TV and radio this morning.
Absolutely. Well, the government is expected to do a U-turn over mandatory COVID-19 vaccines for NHS and care workers after growing concerns the sector could be left with a massive staffing crisis. Who could have seen that coming? Well, for more on this is our political correspondent Tom Harwood on Downing Street, I believe. Yes, there he is. He's just popped up. Tom, was this always going to happen?
I think that this was not always going to happen because there's been some significant changes. And I think the most significant of those changes in the time between when the policy was formulated and the time we're living in now is that Omicron came along, a much more transmissible variant of the virus, something that is less severe as well, but also has greater vaccine escape. And so when we're talking about all of these measures about trying to protect people, particularly from onward transmission, the protection of the virus is significant, but it is less significant when it comes to transmission. And that's what really we're talking about when it comes to vaccine passports or venues where you want certain people to be vaccinated to protect other people. Since the virus has changed and developed, the argument of the government appears to be changing now into saying that the vaccine is something that protects an individual more so than those around that individual.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I mean, I'm not being funny, but wasn't this quite a harebrained policy to begin with? I mean, it didn't take a genius to work out that actually there was going to be a staffing shortage if they pressed ahead with this, because at the end of the day, people do have bodily autonomy. Look, hey, whether people think they should just get the jab, one thing, but, you know, you can't force them, can you? Well, you can, I suppose, in some places.
No, you can't hold people down and jab them. That would be really quite inhumane. I think that the main argument of this policy wasn't that the government wanted to see a staff shortage in the NHS, it's that they wanted to try and get all those people that work in all those various roles in and around the NHS to go and get jabbed. I think it was more of it was a persuasion mechanism rather than anything else. Although it seems that potentially mandates aren't the best way to try and win people over, to try and persuade people to get jabbed. To some extent what we've seen is around those 70,000 people, maybe 50,000 of them them who don't have any medical exemptions, they to some extent have become more steadfast in their views that they won't get jabbed, and the attempted coercion may well have backfired with this potential group. It seems that there is a strong argument in terms of persuasion rather than coercion, and it may well be on this in this situation the government overstepped that line.
And another line the government overstepped, or members of the government and Whitehall, was, of course, those COVID rules. And we've been talking about Partygate for the last couple of weeks, haven't we? And we have now heard that the Prime Minister is expected to receive that Sue Gray report today. So just give us a feeling about what's the timeline from here on in terms of when we can expect to see the results of this report published.
Well, it looks more likely than not that it will be today. It could be any moment, and we will bring it to you live on GB News as soon as we know that the Prime Minister has received that report. Of course, it's not the same report that was written 2 weeks ago. There have been bits that will have been taken out, changed. Of course, we saw that that note from the Metropolitan Police on Friday. That meant that, of course, those 8 investigations that the Met Police is now undertaking cannot in full be explored in the Sue Gray report, or at least this iteration of the Sue Gray report. So something will be published. The Commons sits from 2:30 today. Perhaps we will see the Prime Minister come to the Commons this afternoon, or maybe that will be tomorrow. We'll learn a lot more in the next hour or so. But really what we're looking at in terms of the timeline is a publication of something that looks very much like Sue Gray's report, obviously not with those eight alleged events in full, but with all of the others explored in their original detail. To what extent that excites or ignites any resistance within the Conservative Party again remains to be seen. People will be wanting to take that report away, to read it thoroughly, and then decide what to do next.
Well, Tom, thank you for that. We very much look forward to that report being published, and of course we will bring you that live here on GB News as soon as we have it. Now, disabled veterans were apparently left furious after their hotel for the 40th anniversary of the Falklands conflict cancelled their bookings in order to house asylum seekers. Some of the veterans cannot walk and require carers to accompany them.
Yeah, I'm actually very physically angry about this whole thing, to be honest. One of the veterans, David Charlie Brown, 60, said that he he booked a disabled twin room for him and his carer on the ground floor. Well, according to the Daily Mail, the hotel company chief executive, Bob Potter, confirmed that the booking had been cancelled. He said that he'd forced to reach an agreement with the Home Office to accommodate asylum seekers, or the hotel would have been closed because of a lack of guests. I mean, here's where we are, isn't it? People who've fought and given tremendous sacrifices for this country being turfed out of a hotel for asylum seekers. Anyway, there we go. Joining us now is former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman. Welcome. Thank you very much. Are you as angry about this as I am?
Well, I was actually going to that hotel, Patrick, and I alerted people to what went on. So it's worth me giving you what actually the reality was, which is often different than the single perspective instinct of other people. So we were alerted to this in November, so people had 7 months to do something about it. Then there were 2 or 3 options. The first one was you could cancel and book elsewhere, which most people did. Most people went to a hotel closer to where the main events had taken place. Bob Potter also offered to put people up at his alternative hotel in Lakeside, which is where the World Darts Championship used to take place in Frimley. You either chose to take those options, will do, can do, as you would do in the army, or you could ignore that and make us think about it. And most people took the option to go elsewhere. So those who went closer spent £122 for 3 nights, which was actually less than Bob Potter's fee in his hotel.
I wanted to provide some balance. Obviously, we don't have the hotel here to defend themselves, but they said they were not taking enough bookings to make it a viable option to keep the hotel open. They were approached by the Home Office, offered this deal. They could lease the hotel to asylum seekers, and they took that as an option. And it does seem like it's more of an economic decision rather than a sort of ideological one. What would you say to that?
I'd say that makes absolute sense from a business perspective, and I think you have to look at COVID within that. So Bob Potter, of course, had 2 nights with lots of parachute regiment veterans from 40 years before, including me, or we could get a contract for 180 days when, of course, lots of people are working from home and not business people are not using that hotel. So from a business perspective and an economic perspective, your Bob Potter made absolute sense.
There is a problem, though, isn't there? Because the Home Office is paying for this, right? So we're paying for this. So we have the money to give housing and accommodation to asylum seekers. We have, and it's very hard to estimate, but the latest estimates show 7,000 homeless military veterans. So surely the Home Office could be using that money to house our military veterans. Why aren't they?
It could, but there's lots of ways to do that. So, for example, there's a Hague Housing Trust which can help people. That was originally founded in 1929. And if you take the perspective of my own regiment, the Parachute Regiment, we sort of have this philosophy of leave no one behind. So as soon as we know and are alerted to someone who is in this position, we will use the Parachute Regiment and charity and engage with SAFA, the Soldiers, Sailors and Air Force Association, and do something about that. Now, there's 2 problems that we always face. The first one is that most vets don't come forward. They don't reach out to us. And the second one is largely we're alerted by social media, which is not the place we want to be alerted. We want people to come forward when they have a need so we can help them and sort these things out.
Do you think we treat our veterans well? I mean, I did a big campaign a good few years ago now about the military covenant. I've seen it firsthand where people have been supposedly given, or supposed to have been given, priority housing, mental health care, and they find it very, very difficult to get that housing. And indeed, a lot of councils admitted freely to me, local councils, that actually they weren't really following that military covenant. They weren't giving that kind of priority to that. Do you think we treat our veterans well enough?
Well, armies don't fight wars, nations fight wars. And so both the government policy and the people, the forward leaning of the people have got to be in alignment with this happening. And of course, social and housing policy is not necessarily aligned to that. Now, we have to be careful because there's, of course, lots of civilian military gaps. And one of these, which you see from this issue, is the sort of sacrifice gap, where those people who have lost friends in battle, and I know Charlie lost someone right next door to him, a guy called Mark Holman Smith, there's something about frustration and entitlement that builds up, and this can lead to a sort of deference requirement. We have to be careful of that, and that we don't treat everyone as heroes when one of the other gaps is a value gap, that we think there's something in our character which is innately better than civilians, whereas the reality is there's both bad and good in both the armed forces and in civilian street.
There are, I think, look, hey, I've got no military pedigree. It will shock you, Major General, to know that I've got no military pedigree whatsoever. I'm sure that will come as a huge surprise to everyone watching this as well. I imagine I'd be terrible in battle, don't get me wrong. But that said, I think from a layperson's perspective, I do think, if you're putting yourself in the most harm's way that you could possibly ever imagine being, I think maybe you should get some special treatment. But we're out of time, I'm afraid. But thank you very much, as always. You are now a regular on this show, and we love to see it. Major General Chip Chapman there, of course, whizzing you through that story about the homeless military veterans and a hotel essentially being used for asylum seekers. But it's not really quite as straightforward as that. But it is the optics of it, isn't it? It's the optics of it.
Well, now, going across the Atlantic, the Canadian city of Ottawa has been brought to a standstill this week as 50,000 truckers protested Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's vaccine mandate. Local residents have become, quote, prisoners in their own homes, some say, as the protesters blocked roads and blared horns into the early hours of the morning.
Well, the convoy travelled over 2,000 miles from British Columbia last Sunday. Members have promised that they are planning to stay for the long haul. See what they did there? Joining us now from Ottawa, that's right, ladies and gents, no expense spared here. We're all the way to Ottawa, is Mark Slapinski. Fantastic stuff. He's a journalist from Toronto 99. Mark, does this look like a small fringe group to you?
Absolutely not. There's hundreds of thousands of people in downtown Ottawa right now protesting in front of Parliament, and the last I've heard, they're not leaving until the mandates have been lifted.
Yeah.
And do you think they will be successful? Because Justin Trudeau, as we mentioned there, he has called them a fringe group. He seems to have fled when these truckers were making their way into Ottawa. The reality is that he's not going to change his mind on what is now a national policy, is he?
It's hard to say. I don't think he wants to change, but at the same time, these people are going to do everything they can to make that happen. And like I said, they're not going to leave until something comes out of this.
No, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you know, why has he fled? He's not. I mean, he calls it a small fringe movement, right? Well, you know, a leader of. I mean, Putin doesn't flee from a small fringe movement, does he? But Justin Trudeau, he's off. He's taking his family. They're going to hiding. Well, that says he's either a coward or it's not a small fringe movement. And then, you know, you look at it and go, hang on a minute. Has he done it for effect? Has he done it to make it seem as though there was a threat? Because from what I've seen, you will know better than me. But from what I've seen, this is a demonstration. This is people blaring horns. This is rallies. This is discussions. They're not torching the government building, are they?
No, not at all. This is a peaceful demonstration. Even the local media acknowledged that it was peaceful. There was no arrest. There was no violence. There was nothing like that. If you ask me, I think it was staged. I think he's just doing this to paint the protesters as being dangerous or violent when that simply isn't true. There's nothing of that sort.
Mm. Do you think that Justin Trudeau, who's supposedly one of the most, well, he calls himself, doesn't he, you know, one of the most progressive, ultra-woke people, it's people kind, not mankind, ladies and gentlemen. We can't say that anymore, can you, over there? But is he actually quite authoritarian, do you think? Because some of the rules he's brought in there are pretty heavy-duty.
I would say so. I'd say he's at least a wannabe authoritarian. He's done as much as he can to take people's rights away. Now he's not letting unvaccinated truckers into Canada, which has hurt the supply chain. It's hurt a lot of people, and that's just one thing out of many. So I don't think it would be unfair to say authoritarian, or at least wannabe authoritarian.
What would you say to people who say, well, look, he's not saying you have to have a jab to actually work in this industry. He's just saying you have to quarantine. It's, you know, a small price to pay, some would say, for ensuring we have maximum safety in terms of people crossing borders who might potentially have COVID. So some would say it's a small price to pay having to quarantine.
Sure. My understanding is with truckers, they're in limited contact with other people. They're mostly in their trucks. So my understanding is that the chances of them spreading COVID would be minimal.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of these truckers, I hate to do this, but I am just going to take issue with something that's just there. It says these anti-vaccine mandate truckers. Are they all anti-vaccine mandates, or are they just people who have had enough? You know, I think it's you know, there can sometimes be a connotation, can't there, that some people are anti-vax. I'm sure that's not what we're saying down there, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot of these things that you see, aren't there? You know, anti-vax protests. Well, actually, are they anti-vax, or are they just anti the curtailment of their civil liberties? You know,
I think well, there's quite a few different reasons that people came out here. I think some of them, they're upset with the mandates. Some of them, they're upset with the economy. Some of them, they're just upset with Trudeau in general, and they're using this as a way to show their anger towards the government and his failed policies.
Well, Mark Slapinski, thank you so much for joining us this morning, journalist from Toronto 99. Look, it's I think it's interesting, actually, that they've changed sort of the aim of their protests from cancelling this mandate, so to speak. I don't know if you can call it a mandate, this quarantine rule for truckers, and to just wanting to cancel the vaccine mandates in general. I think they're less likely to achieve that, to be honest. But look, people's right to protest, isn't it?
I mean, Trudeau doesn't look like he's going to listen to anyone, and you know, it is one of those things. I mean, he gave quite a famous speech, didn't he, about you know. You can't go on public transport in Canada now if you haven't had the jab. Is my understanding anyway. I had a look at it before I came on air, and that's what I found. Yeah, that's pretty heavy duty, that really, isn't it? And you can't get a federal job, so it's all very well and good going, hey, look, come on, you don't have to get the vaccine. Well, if you want to travel somewhere and work in a federal job, then you do. And so I've really struggled to see how really this can be done in the name of, you know, being good for people and good. You're either a president for all people or not. You know?
Anyway, let's give you a couple of other stories we found that we thought might be of interest to you. The chairman of the Hampshire Police Federation says police officers should be allowed to sleep at work. Yes, Sergeant Zoe Wakefield claims this could help reduce fatigue, improve well-being and boost performance. Concerns about the levels of sleep officers get have been previously raised by union chiefs. What do you think about this?
Sorry. Oh, gosh, sorry, I just drifted off that. Yeah, no, it turns out you can't sleep at work and do your job. How can you? Can you imagine that? Officers asleep, someone's just getting stabbed next to the police car. There's a guy just, you know,
very
catching his 41.
bizarre. But then again, you know, people do need sleep, and police officers maybe don't get enough sleep. That's what nighttime's for.
That's what nighttime's for.
Well, they work at night.
Yeah, okay, I know.
Let us know what you think and keep all your thoughts coming in. GBViews at GBNews.
I'm going to go for a nap.
.uk, and we'll be back just in a second after this break.
Hello again. Storm Corrie is clearing away, but it's still windy out there. Cold wind as well, slowly easing through the day. Sunny spells for many, certainly in the east. A few showers in the west. There is that storm system that brought the damage across Scotland overnight. The low pressure heading away, but bringing some very strong winds to Germany and Belgium today. Behind it, the isobars slowly opening up, but as I said, still quite a cold and brisk wind blowing out there, and blowing showers into Wales, west and north of Scotland, some patchy rain coming into the west of Northern Ireland as well. Elsewhere, most places dry, just 1 or 2 showers in southwest England, and many eastern areas dry, fine and sunny. But it is cold, and it feels especially cold in the east where the winds are stronger. It feels closer to freezing when you add on the wind. Now, we're going to see a bit more rain trickling into Scotland and Northern Ireland through this evening. That will slowly spread its way southwards into parts of the Midlands and Wales by morning. So a cloudy night, a damp night, and things turning milder as well. Early in the night, we could see temperatures down to 3 or 4 degrees, but by dawn, most places up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So a mild day to come on Tuesday. Quite a grey start with outbreaks of rain, and it will be windy again across northern Scotland. Now, not as windy as through the weekend, but we could still see gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour, and because of those recent storms, that could still also bring some disruption. So there is a yellow warning in place across northern Scotland, some brightness across southern Scotland, northern England, and look at the temperatures up to 11 to maybe 13 Celsius, so really quite mild. Stays blustery across northern Scotland with further showers through the evening. It stays damp across Wales, Northern Ireland, parts of the Midlands with rain and drizzle here and there. Clearer skies again across southern Scotland and northeast England. The winds will continue to be a feature of the weather this week, although not as strong as at the weekend. Fairly mild for the next few days, but a colder spell on Friday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point right here on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki, on your TV and on your radio. And of course, we're here all the way through until midday.
Yes, and make sure you get in touch with your views. We'd love to hear them on GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll get to those throughout the rest of the show, but first, the latest news.
Good Good morning, it's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the highly anticipated report into alleged Downing Street parties during lockdown is expected today. It's understood senior civil servant Sue Gray is now preparing to hand over the findings of her inquiry to Number 10 imminently. It was delayed after the Metropolitan Police asked her to pare it back to avoid prejudicing its own investigations. The Prime Minister refused to be drawn on claims that the report will be a whitewash.
We're going to have to wait and see the outcome of the. You're going to have to wait and see the outcome of the investigations. But of course, I stick absolutely to what I've said in the past. But I'm here to talk about the free ports that we're doing around the UK, and what they are also doing. What they are also doing. What I stick in complete. You have to wait and see what the investigations. And with all due respect.
The government is expected to announce a U-turn over compulsory COVID vaccines for NHS workers. The Health Secretary is reportedly going to scrap the policy over fears it could lead to a major staffing crisis. Critics are also calling for the change because the Omicron variant of coronavirus is milder than previous variants. Well, today some schools are closed and thousands of people are without power after back-to-back storms battered parts of the UK. 2 people were killed by falling trees in 90-mile-an-hour winds at the weekend. That includes a 9-year-old boy. A yellow weather warning remains in place for Scotland and the north of England. Storm Malik was followed by Storm Corrie just 24 hours later. People in Tyne and Wear say the damage has been shocking.
You would never ever think in a million years that would happen, especially weighting it of stone. But it shows you how strong wind is.
Trees down, gable end, down Sion Terrace is gone.
We've been in the northeast, we've just come to get used to it really, but these last few years the weather seems to be just getting worse and worse.
Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood is still in custody after being arrested on suspicion of rape and assault. Police say they were made aware of images and videos posted on social media by a woman reporting incidents of physical violence. Manchester United has suspended the player, announcing he won't train or play for the Premier League club until further notice. New evidence shows the suspect in the Madeleine McCann investigation worked at the holiday apartments in Portugal shortly before the 3-year-old disappeared in 2007. A documentary airing tonight on German TV reveals the 44-year-old paedophile known as Christian B carried out repairs at the resort. The man, who's currently in prison for rape, denies any involvement. A Brexit freedoms bill, which the government claims will cut £1 billion of red tape for UK businesses, is set to be brought forward. It affects how EU laws, which were kept for legal continuity after Brexit, are handled. Downing Street says the bill will ensure changes can be made easily and allow the country to capitalise on Brexit freedoms more quickly. The Prime Minister has warned it would be a disaster for Russia if it invades Ukraine. Boris Johnson says Russia needs to step back from the brink as the Russian Navy carried out exercises in the Norwegian Sea. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace also called for tensions to be de-escalated as he arrived in Hungary at the start of a diplomatic tour. Meanwhile, the government's due to unveil new measures making it easier to sanction Russian interests, a move Moscow has described as alarming. The charity Gamble Aware says up to 1 million women are at risk from harm from gambling. Research suggests that among women experiencing high levels of harm, 2 in 5 may not seek help, and many increase gambling over the winter months. Lisa Walker became addicted to gambling after winning a 6-figure sum in a Southend casino when she was 29.
I lost my house, I ended up homeless, and I ended up in a hostel with my 2 children through gambling. So I just want to say a big thank you to Gamble Aware for raising, this serious subject of women and gambling harms. And to anybody that's out there that's suffering, please don't suffer in silence.
Footballer Christian Eriksen has signed for Premier League club Brentford just 7 months after suffering a cardiac arrest on the pitch while playing for Denmark. The 29-year-old, who's been fitted now with an internal defibrillator, hasn't played since he collapsed at Euro 2020. The former Tottenham midfielder has signed a 6-month deal. You are now up to date here on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to the point.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. On your TV and radio, we're here with loads of great guests. Our opinions, of course, but most importantly, your views as well.
Yes, well, the government is expected to announce a U-turn on mandatory COVID jabs for NHS and social care workers after the Omicron variant is found to be milder than first feared. We'll be joined by a political correspondent, Tom Harwood, with the latest on that.
Yes, and children as young as 7 are to be told they are not, quote, racially innocent under Brighton Hove Council's new anti-racist education plan. Our culture and social affairs editor, Inaya Falarin-Iman, will be with us to talk us through all of this. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on the so-called ghost children who never returned to class after lockdown.
Now, shocking new figures released by the Centre for Social Justice think tank have revealed just how severe the problem of children being severely absent from school is. Last year, the organisation revealed that when schools reopened in autumn 2020 following lockdown, the number of pupils who were missing most school days was 93,500. This was a dramatic increase of 33,000 from before the pandemic. Now, new analysis just published sheds new light on the sheer scale of the problem. It finds that when schools reopened in autumn 2020, in half of all local authorities, at least 500 children were missing more school than they were attending. Over 700 schools were missing an entire class worth of children, and the most disadvantaged schools were 10 times as likely to have a class worth of children missing than the most affluent schools. So much for levelling up. Where do we think these children are? I can assure you they're not just at home living out a fulfilling, engaging childhood with a comprehensive, intellectually rigorous homeschooling regime. They're not missing school because they're busy at home learning Latin, reciting Shakespeare and practicing calculus in big middle-class suburban homes. No, these children are the most vulnerable, most disadvantaged, least hopeful children in society. They're most likely children with poor parents, struggling parents, some of whom are undoubtedly being out and out neglectful. Some of these children are definitely living a life of terror, caught in the midst of domestic abuse. These are children surrounded by crime and drugs, probably living in the dingiest of conditions in forgotten council blocks. And this really matters. That cannot be overstated. Severe absence, as a lead researcher in this study points out, is, quote, a conveyor belt into the youth criminal justice system. In fact, 90% of young offenders sentenced to custody were persistently absent from school. That's 90%. Half of the current prison population report that they regularly miss school. So the links are there. And in effect, and I don't think this is hyperbole, failure to get these so-called ghost children back in classrooms is akin to waving them through into a life of crime. So, given the sheer scale of the problem, you'd think the government have a plan, right? Wrong. Robert Halfman, chair of the Education Select Committee in Parliament, who wrote the foreword for this report, says government has made virtually no effort to find out what has happened to these children since autumn 2020. The Department for Education simply does not know where they are. Once again, evidence of a government completely consumed by COVID and lockdowns, yet ignorant to its glaringly obvious consequences. Yet again, a government that is chronically failing this country's children.
Yeah, we've seen it time and time again, haven't we? You know, the increasing violence towards children as well, domestic abuse, etc. And
this report actually points out the case of Arthur Lavinia Hughes as a case in point in terms of what happens when you lock down children in their homes. Some of these children are kept away from social services who are there to protect children, the vulnerable children, and that's why you get cases like that happening. And the fact the Department for Education seems to have virtually no plan at all to combat this, let alone know where these children are and what's happening to them, is I think, tragic.
It's sleepwalking towards disaster, isn't it? And I know this is a massive cliche, right? But children are the future, right? I know, I nearly was sticking my mouth when I said that, but it's true. Children are the future, right? And You know, the fact is that if you just neglect them, and play the tape forward. So what happens? So they become less employable. So then what happens there? Then they don't get as good at jobs if they work at all. They turn to crime.
Absolutely.
They end up on benefits, etc., etc., etc. It's completely self-defeating.
It's a cost to society as a whole, isn't it? Well, we are happy to be joined by Alice Wilcox, who is the head of education policy at the Centre for Social Justice, who released this report. It's called "Lost but Not Forgotten: The Reality of Severe Absence in Schools Post-Lockdown." Good morning, Alice. Just tell us what were the most damning findings in this report.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I think the most damning findings in this report is just how pervasive severe absence is across our school system. You know, we found that nearly 800 schools have an entire class worth of children who are effectively missing. And when we break this down, we find that in secondary schools, 1 in 6 secondary schools have an entire class worth of children who were severely absent in autumn 2020. And what's striking is the correlation between disadvantaged areas and pupils basically going missing. You know, if you're a school in the most disadvantaged area, you're 10 times more likely to have an entire class worth of children missing. And strikingly, actually, it's areas in the red wall seats that we're seeking to level up and regenerate, you know, that have the greatest issues. You know, this weekend, the government mentioned about regeneration and greater infrastructure in Sheffield. Well, that's actually one of the areas that consistently has the worst rates of severe absence. 1 in 10 schools in that area have an entire class worth of children who are severely absent.
These are absolutely shocking stats, right? They are shocking stats, but it shouldn't be a surprise, because what do we think's going on? What do we think's happening? But you mentioned there about some of these red wall seats in some of these disadvantaged areas and stuff like that. You know, I mean, realistically now, the future for these children is almost non-existent, is it? I mean, the only way they might get away with it is if we keep up the policy of teachers marking their exams for them, because you could mask it that way potentially. But in reality, these kids aren't going to get any qualifications, are they?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Actually, I think you've touched on a really good point there, because a quarter of these kids are actually in exam critical years. So they're in years 10 and 11, which means that they are really going to struggle to catch up on education. You know, we really welcome the fact the government's talking about education catch-up, but these kids really, they can't catch up if they're not attending their lessons.
And just tell us about what you're asking the government to do to combat this problem, because Robert Halfon, who of course wrote the foreword to this report and is the chair of the Education Select Committee in Parliament, he's basically said the government doesn't seem to have a plan. They don't know where these children are.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that the government has really tried to tackle attendance recently. So, you know, the new Secretary of State for Education has really pledged to focus on attendance more broadly. They've got consultations and reviews. And the Children's Commissioner actually is doing a big inquiry into ghost children. So that's wonderful. But a lot of this is just evidence gathering. I think what's really damning about this is that we don't know what's happened to these children. The government hasn't released any figures since autumn 2020. They've got the data. And by the time that it'll be published, it'll be 7 months since these children were last in school. So we're really letting this crisis kind of unfold in schools. We're hearing from charities that this is unfolding, and we have no plan specifically for severe absence. So what we're calling for is that we take some of the money. You know, it's money that's already been pledged to spend on catch-up. There's an underspend likely to come from the National Tutoring Programme. And we think that you could make the world of difference if you take this money and invest it into attendance practitioners. Who've got a proven success rate, actually. This model comes from a charity that we've worked with that we hear from School Home Support. And they actually manage to take severely absent pupils. They figure out what's going on at home, and they give them the support they need to get into the classroom, and they actually improve their attendance by 30 days.
Yeah, and just very finally, we've just had an email from John saying, Mercy, stop blaming government. The responsibility for children are parents. And to be fair, I did actually say some of these parents are just being out and out neglectful. But what is the role of family in all of this, and the role of parents? Because ultimately, it's parents' responsibility to make sure their children are getting to school.
Yeah, you know, the role of parents is paramount, actually. The role of family sits at the heart of this, which is why our recommendation is actually about getting parents involved in education. You know, it's really parents who get their children into school. But as you'll see from some of the case studies, when you work with the whole family, you discover that there's a lot of things going on hidden, basically, from view. You know, you mentioned domestic violence. That's obviously a massive issue, but also financial concerns. That was the biggest issue that school home support saw from the parents they were supporting this year. You know, they're choosing between putting on their heating or paying for essentials to get their children into school. And so removing some of those barriers to attendance and telling them, you know, supporting them to engage in education really sits at the heart of this. But parents, you know, they're the ones who really should be getting their children into school, definitely.
No, exactly. And I think it's a really important point, this family thing. A lot of people are making this, indeed, Melandra, fantastic name, actually, saying she has one of these ghost children and they are learning Latin at home. And I do think a lot of it is, you know, it does depend on the parents. But at the same time as well, you know, people in deprived areas as well, maybe mum and dad have to work 3 jobs each, etc. In reality, the situation is not the same for everyone, is it? But Alice, thank you very, very much. Alice Wilcox, their Head of Education Policy at the Centre for Social Justice. I mean, I think a lot of it is parents. And I don't mean that in terms of just good and bad parents. I mean, also parental circumstances, isn't it? You know,
yeah. Absolutely. Well, keep getting in touch with your views, GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, moving on to a story we talked about a bit earlier. New evidence in the Madeleine McCann investigation has revealed the prime suspect worked at holiday apartments in Portugal prior to the 3-year-old's disappearance.
Yes, well, for more on this now, our Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us. Mark, thank you very much. Just bring us up to date on these developments, please.
Yeah, this is a German national known as Christian B. He was named less than 2 years now ago by the German authorities as a prime suspect responsible, they believe, for the abduction and murder of Madeleine McCann. They've been trying to amass evidence. There's lots of circumstantial evidence out there showing that he was someone who was very familiar with the Algarve, and in particular Praia de Luz, the tourist resort where Madeleine McCann and her family were when she disappeared on the 3rd of May 2007. Now, the latest information has been unearthed by a documentary crew from Germany, from Sat1, the broadcaster, which is due to air in Germany this evening. And as part of that investigation, they have spoken to someone who knew Christian B and who has confirmed that he was a handyman who worked for a third-party company that offered services to a number of hotel and accommodation complexes throughout that area, including the Ocean Club, which is the apartment complex that the McCann family were staying at in May of 2007, that he had been working there on occasions doing work to repair faults at that complex in the weeks and months before the abduction of Madeleine McCann.
I find it astonishing that this seemingly is only just coming to light now.
Yeah, it's come to light because the documentary crew, through sort of good journalistic endeavour, have managed to trace this individual, and the German prosecutors have thanked the satellite broadcaster because it's passed on the information that they've gathered. They say that, look, you know, they acknowledge that not everyone will speak to the police and prosecutors, that they may have concerns about doing that and are more willing to speak to the media. That appears to be what has happened in this case. In addition to this information about the fact that Christian B was working at that complex where Madeleine McCann had been staying around about the time she disappeared, they've also done more detailed cell site analysis of his mobile phone. Now, the police had carried out some cell site analysis as well, which showed that he was in the Praia de Luz area at the time that Madeleine McCann disappeared. Well, this more detailed examination of that cell site evidence shows that he was actually very close, within a 5-minute drive off the Ocean Complex at the time that Madeleine disappeared. All of these extra strands of evidence, they're all coming together to make a more and more compelling case about this man's guilt.
Now, you've, I'm sure, followed this for a decade and a half, since 2007. I mean, how significant would you say this development is compared to all the developments there have been so far?
Well, on the face of it, it certainly appears to be quite significant. As I say, there is a lot of evidence out there that together, taken in totality, builds an increasingly compelling picture pointing the finger at this man. It's not been enough so far to put before the courts. Maybe this might change things. We don't know as yet, but there's other evidence. For instance, an ex-girlfriend of Christian B has been speaking in recent days, and she speaks about his fascination. He is a convicted sex offender, a paedophile. She was speaking about his fascination with prepubescent girls in particular. Also, the fact that on the evening that Madeleine McCann disappeared, he was due to drive to her home in the Algarve and spend the evening with her. He was due to drive there in his camper van that he had at the time. Apparently, she says he never showed up. And obviously, this whole fascination with Christian B was sparked by a tip-off that the German authorities got in 2017 from an associate of this man who, in a conversation over drink in a pub, while there was, again, a programme about Madeleine McCann on the anniversary of her disappearance, when that aired, this person said that they were quite alarmed, as Christian B had said, that he knew what had happened to Madeleine McCann at the time. So a lot of evidence out there. Does it all amount to the kind of compelling evidence that tips it over into a prosecution? Well, we don't know as yet, but certainly the authorities in Germany, here in the UK, they're all working to try to get as much information together as possible to eventually be able to solve this case that, as you say, has been 15 years since this young girl disappeared.
Yeah, I still can't believe it's been that long. Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White, there, our Home and Security Editor. Well, look, after the break, we'll be discussing the controversial new guidance given to teachers to tell pupils as young as 7 years old that they are not racially innocent. Don't go anywhere, we'll be back after the weather.
Hello again. Storm Corrie is clearing away, but it's still windy out there. Cold wind as well, slowly easing through the day. Sunny spells for many, certainly in the east. A few showers in the west. There is that storm system that brought the damage across Scotland overnight. The low pressure heading away, but bringing some very strong winds to Germany and Belgium today. Behind it, the isobars slowly opening up, but as I said, still quite a cold and brisk wind blowing out there, and blowing showers into Wales, west and north of Scotland, some patchy rain coming into the west of Northern Ireland as well. Elsewhere, most places dry, just one or two showers in southwest England, and many eastern areas dry, fine and sunny. But it is cold, and it feels especially cold in the east where the winds are stronger. It feels closer to freezing when you add on the wind. Now, we're going to see a bit more rain trickling into Scotland and Northern Ireland through this evening. That will slowly spread its way southwards into parts of the Midlands and Wales by morning. So a cloudy night, a damp night, and things turning milder as well. Early in the night, we could see temperatures down to 3 or 4 degrees, but by dawn, most places up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So a mild day to come on Tuesday. Quite a grey start with outbreaks of rain, and it will be windy again across northern Scotland. Now, not as windy as through the weekend, but we could still see gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour, and because of those recent storms, that could still also bring some disruption. So there is a yellow warning in place across northern Scotland, some brightness across southern Scotland, northern England, and look at the temperatures up to 11 to maybe 13 Celsius, so really quite mild. Stays blustery across northern Scotland with further showers through the evening. It stays damp across Wales, Northern Ireland, parts of the Midlands with rain and drizzle here and there. Clearer skies again across southern Scotland and northeast England. The winds will continue to be a feature of the weather this week, although not as strong as at the weekend. Fairly mild for the next few days, but a colder spell on Friday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
And Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News home and security editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Good morning. It's 11:27.
You do it then. Fine, whatever. I'll
this
just
is
go.
to the point. This is to the point. With me, Patrick Christys, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News, live on your radio and TV this morning.
Yes, well, the Prime Minister has now received an update in the Sue Gray report into lockdown parties in Downing Street. The findings are expected to be made public within hours, and we will keep you updated. So that is the news there, that obviously the Prime Minister has now received an update.
An update. So we're not quite sure what an update means, but that is the line coming out of Downing Street at the moment. But now teachers are being told to tell children as young as 7 that they're not, quote, racially innocent. It's part of diversity training being offered by Brighton and Hove City Council, and it sparked outrage, understandably, from some parents, with one starting a petition to have the training scrapped, and that's currently got around 4,000 signatures.
I mean, where do you start? The council says that all teachers require the training that will inform specific racial literacy-focused lessons, which I actually struggle to even say, let alone get my head around, but there we are. Currently, they aren't mandatory, but should children as young as 7 be taught lessons on race? Well, joining us now to unpick this is our Culture and Social Affairs editor, Inaya Falariman. Your views?
Yeah, so this is part of Brighton and Hove's 5-year anti-racism strategy, and this is partly in the fury of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, when many organisations and institutions effectively capitulated to a racial identity politics ideology. And part of that is teaching white privilege, and one of their racial literacy classes that were meant to be for staff has white privilege, institutional and kind of structural racism, and it actively says taking a critical race theory approach. And I think it is really interesting because a lot of people have been using the phrase critical race theory for the last few years. And people say, oh, it's from America, we don't really know what it means, but actually they have actually used that in some of the training programs that they've put forward. And what has been quite striking is that there has been a pushback from parents. So this petition has over 4,000 signatories, and it is very unfortunate. Parents trust teachers and institutions to educate their kids and trust them that they will be given impartial, balanced and nuanced information. But now parents are actively now having to take their children's teaching into their own hands because they cannot always trust now when it comes to race and gender and other identity politics narratives what their kids are going to be taught.
Now, my daughter's school isn't that racially diverse, and of course, I don't necessarily mind teachers teaching about children being accepting. Not that any child I know has ever not been accepting of her because of her skin colour. But why are they so intent on going all the way and, you know, calling 7-year-olds racist, which is effectively what they're doing? They're going beyond the call of duty, which is teach kids to be accepting of each other, and just drifting off into these sort of quite radical ideologies, really. Why are they doing that?
Well, I think that many of them are really well-meaning, and as I said, when there was that a lot of emotion and kind of righteous emotion that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement, many organisations were scrambling to find out what they can do to show that they are anti-racist. And I think that people that take a more liberal approach or have a more kind of common humanity, Martin Luther King-esque approach really need to think about actually creating their own alternative resources. Because actually when these teachers kind of go onto the internet and type in some of these things, they find all of this stuff and they're already prepared, ready to teach it. And so I do think much more materials that actually take a much more nuanced and balanced approach need to be created to make sure that teachers are aware that there's other materials out there. But I think what is also interesting is that a former Education Minister, Sir John Hayes, it was reported in the Telegraph as well, has said that this is alarming and he hopes to be raising this with the Education Secretary Nazim Zahawi. And I really do hope, as Kemi Badenoch, when she did her statements in 2020, said that teaching white privilege as an uncontested fact is illegal. And if councils are doing that, then they should absolutely be examined by the government.
Do you think we'll see an increase in homeschooling? I know actually we touched on it earlier on, but for different reasons. But do you think we'll see an increase in it? Because I've got to be honest with you, if my hypothetical children going forward, if I thought that they were going to have their heads filled with whether it's things with the trans lobby are going to be raised questions from being 7 years old about whether they've been born in the right body, they're going to be taught that they've got some kind of racial bias, I'd think twice about sending them to school.
I think many parents perhaps are really thinking that. I think we really have to get our head around how serious what is being taught. Teaching kids as young as 7 that there is something wrong or corrupted about something that they had no part in, their skin colour, is actually incredibly dangerous. And I do think that we are at a time in a society where so much progress has been made that actually the liberal approach has actually transformed race relations in this country. And now we seem to be rehabilitating old ideas that because of your skin colour, that can tell us something about your morality, your politics, your worldview. We are going backwards. Yeah. I do think it is really important for parents to see that this is fundamentally wrong and really intervene.
Thank you, Inaya Falarin. Iman, there are social and cultural affairs editor. I think I completely agree with that, because my worry would be, for example, if the teachers started teaching the white children at my daughter's school, that they should feel guilty or that they should see my daughter as this completely other different sort of human being. That would backfire, and I think they would start seeing her differently, not more equal in a way.
So true. It raises a difference, doesn't it?
It does. Well, coming up on the show, why grazing animals can be a help and a hindrance in meeting the UK's tree planting goals. And we'll be finding out more about the UK's rainforest too, interestingly. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
A very good morning to you. It's 11:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. In the last few minutes, Sue Gray has provided an update to the Prime Minister on her investigation into alleged Downing Street parties during lockdown. The Cabinet Office has confirmed. Early this morning, Boris Johnson said he sticks absolutely to what he said before he awaits the findings of the senior civil servants' inquiry. It was further delayed after the Metropolitan Police asked her to pare it back to avoid prejudicing its own investigations. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on this story. A British woman who was found guilty of lying about being gang raped in Cyprus has had her conviction overturned. The woman, who's now 21, was given a 4-month suspended sentence in 2020 for fomenting public mischief after withdrawing her rape complaint. She's now been cleared after the Supreme Court of Cyprus acknowledged she'd not been given a fair trial. The government's expected to announce a U-turn over compulsory COVID vaccines for NHS workers. The Health Secretary is reportedly going to scrap the policy over fears it could lead to a major staffing crisis. Critics are also calling for the change because the Omicron variant of coronavirus is milder than previous variants. Schools are closed and thousands are still without power after back-to-back storms battered parts of the UK. 2 people were killed by falling trees in 90-mile-an-hour winds at the weekend. One of those was a 9-year-old boy. A yellow weather warning remains in place for Scotland and the north of England. Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood is still in custody after being arrested on suspicion of rape and assault. Police say they were made aware of images and videos posted on social media by a woman reporting incidents of physical violence. Manchester United has suspended the player, announcing he won't train or play for the Premier League club until further notice. New evidence shows the suspect in the Madeleine McCann investigation worked at the holiday apartments in Portugal shortly before the 3-year-old disappeared in 2007. A documentary airing tonight on German TV reveals 44-year-old convicted paedophile known only as Christian B carried out the repairs at the resort. The man, who's currently in prison for rape, denies any involvement. The government's planning to bring forward the Brexit Freedoms Bill, which it claims will cut £1 billion of red tape for UK businesses. It affects how EU laws, which were kept for legal continuity after Brexit, are handled. Downing Street says the bill will allow the country to capitalise on Brexit freedoms more quickly. Footballer Christian Eriksen has signed for Premier League club Brentford 7 months after suffering a cardiac arrest on the pitch while playing for Denmark. The 29-year-old, who's been fitted now with an internal defibrillator, hasn't played since he collapsed playing at Euro 2020. The former Tottenham midfielder has signed a 6-month deal. You are now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. A short break and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It's 11:38. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're on your TV and, indeed, your radio.
Yes, well, the Prime Minister answered questions from reporters following his visit to Tilbury Port in Essex this morning. He commented on the NHS vaccination deadline, the anniversary of Brexit, which is, of course, today, and the Sue Gray report, which is expected to be given to Downing Street later today. Here's what he had to say.
We're going to have to wait and see the outcome of the investigations, but of course I stick absolutely to what I've said in the past. My view about NHS workers and everybody who is involved in looking after vulnerable people, all healthcare professionals should get a vaccine. That's absolutely clear. I think that Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, is going to be saying a bit more later on about how you might deal with different variants of coronavirus, because they have different implications when it comes to transmissibility. But you have to wait to hear what Saj says. What I will say to the President Putin, as I've said before, is that I think we really all need to step back from the brink, and I think Russia needs to step back from the brink. I think that an invasion of Ukraine and any incursion into Ukraine beyond the territory that Russia has already taken in 2014 would be an absolute disaster for the world, but above all it would be a disaster for Russia. As you know, the UK believes, supports the territorial sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. We've been there since 2014, training Ukrainian troops under Operation Orbital, about 21,000 we've trained. We give lethal but defensive weaponry to Ukraine. But what I know is that the Ukrainians will fight. If you go to Ukraine, you talk to Ukrainians, I'm afraid any Russian incursion, any further Russian invasion will be bitterly and bloodily resisted. We all understand the pressures that the cost of living crunch is putting on people, and it's being driven, as you know, Nick, by the inflation that you're seeing around the world, particularly in energy costs. And so we're going to be bringing forward, I know the Chancellor is looking at a package of things to abate energy costs, but that's on top of all we're doing to try to support people through this post-COVID recovery phase. What we're really seeing is the stresses and strains of the global economy fueling inflation in the post-COVID recovery phase. So we're lifting the living wage by another £1,000 for families on the living wage, effectively cutting the taxes on universal credit, so people on low incomes on universal credit also get an uplift in their income, but also supporting families with a £12 billion package overall to help people with the cost of living crunch. But you'll be hearing more from the Chancellor in due course. So what we're doing is we're changing the system whereby under the retained EU law principle, all the EU acquis, as it's called, all the EU rules are kept on the UK statute book, as it were, frozen. We're changing that so that they can all be amended, they can all be changed, just like any other piece of law. And what we'll do is in all the areas where the UK is strong, so cyber, artificial intelligence, gene technology, all the cutting edge technologies of the future, we are going to be making data, all that area. We're going to make sure that we do things differently and better where appropriate. We won't diverge for the sake of it, but we're going to make sure that this is the #1 place to invest and do business because of the freedoms that we have.
Why do they always put high vis in a hard hat?
That hard hat was huge.
Yeah. I just don't understand.
That was our takeaway from that whole.
I think that's the most important thing about the whole thing, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't understand why they seem to do it. It's like, right, OK, I'll look like a workman. No, you won't. You stood nowhere near where the work's taking place. You're not doing any work. You're there for a photo shoot, for an interview about stuff that isn't really relating to whatever the heck was going on in the background. Yeah. Well, Boris Johnson there giving you an update on a whole host of things that the government is supposedly doing. But sticking with politics for a moment, the government is expected to do a U-turn, unshockingly, over mandatory COVID-19 vaccines for NHS and care workers after growing concerns the sector could be left with a massive staffing crisis. Well, joining us now is Dr. Lawrence Gurlis, a GP with over 30 years' experience, who's kept us regularly updated, thank you very much for doing so as well, on the latest COVID developments within his profession. Well, I suppose this is quite good news. I mean, I've maintained for quite a while that if I was on my deathbed, I couldn't give a stuff whether or not the person making me better had had a jab or not.
It's the right decision, Patrick and Mercy. I think it was always a strategy to encourage people to get vaccinated. Some people will say it was coercion. It obviously would be a nonsense to sack 70,000 NHS staff, and I think the care home staff are being allowed back as well. I have to say I'm slightly out of line with a number of people. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think the health service staff should have voluntarily got themselves vaccinated. We're all required to be vaccinated against other things, MMR, hepatitis B, flu, BCG, and so on. This is just another vaccine that you may not particularly want to take, but it was required as part of the job. So I think more people should have taken it up. I don't buy into the conspiracy theories. I don't think health service staff should believe conspiracy theories that are not founded in science. We know the vaccines may have some side effects. But I think the resistance to the vaccines from the health service staff was in some respects slightly disappointing.
Yes. I do take issue slightly with the implication that people who are refusing to get the jab are necessarily following conspiracy theories, because some people do have legitimate concerns about them, don't they? About the long-term research that hasn't had a chance to be done, really, about it, issues with fertility. Some people feel they have natural immunity and that sort of should disqualify them from having to get the vaccine. So given that people do have these legitimate concerns, what would you be doing to encourage those people you say should be getting the jab to go ahead and get it?
Well, first of all, I accept what you say about natural immunity, but the only way you can get natural immunity to COVID is by having the infection. And where I will agree with Steve Clark is that if you've got documented infection, there's no need to have the vaccine. But I've seen healthcare workers on Twitter and on your program say, I've got natural immunity because I take vitamin C and vitamin D and I'm healthy. Trust me, I did all those things, but I caught COVID. There is no such thing as natural immunity to COVID unless you've had the infection. And that is one of the conspiracy theories that I'm trying to debunk. It is a highly contagious infection, and unless you've had a lot of vaccines or the infection itself, it's easy to catch. And we're seeing that at the moment with Omicron, which fortunately is very mild, but it is highly transmissible. Having said that, the fact that Omicron is mild means that there's less of a need for compulsory vaccination. So I'm pleased about the government's U-turn. I'm getting a lot of stick from anti-vaxxers. So let me say I'm pleased they're not losing their jobs. I'm pleased about the U-turn, but I still think having vaccinations is part of what we have to do for our job.
Yeah, I mean, so this, just to clarify, because we've had a few emails in on this now about this exact thing. So NHS staff, so people in your hospital in King's College London or whatever, and then you've got what, care home staff as well? Does this apply to them?
Yeah, I think that already applied to them. I think some of them lost their jobs in November, and I think retrospectively now that they're going to be allowed back.
Ah, good. You know what? You just took the words right out of my mouth. We should swap roles, although actually no, don't, because I'll end up killing people. But we should. It was great that you've said that, because that was exactly what I was about to say. And I think, presumably as well, this might come as a relief to a lot of care home residents, frankly, because there was already a bit of a shortage. There was already issues there. So that will be good news for them. In reality, now, this is all down to Omicron, isn't it? This is all down to this thing that is more transmissible, the silver bullet in a way. Because I remember you sitting here probably, well, gosh, what is it now? A month and a half ago, something like that, saying this could be the answer to all of our problems. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anyone say that. And you were right, weren't you?
Thank you, Patrick. And I spotted the meatloaf reference when I took the words right out of your mouth. Very appropriate. Yes, look, I didn't get everything right. I didn't predict 5 waves of this virus, but I have been saying for some time, Omicron is what's rescued us. By mid-January, we'll see the beginning of the end. Here we are, the end of January. I think the case numbers were low yesterday. Just a slight warning, the case numbers could be high tonight because they're introducing reinfections into the figures. So I don't want to hear talk of more lockdown tonight when the numbers come out, because they're going to be calculated slightly differently from here on in.
No, absolutely. And it's nice that you made us aware of that, because I wonder whether or not people like Chris Whitty would have done. But thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence Jerlis, who's been in the medical profession for 30 years and was right.
Well, the end is in sight, it would seem, wouldn't it?
And indeed, very nearly the end of the show as well.
Yes, so let's go to that last story. Grazing animals are often seen as the enemy of tree planting programmes by some, but they can... This is something...
Rarely a day goes by that I think of these grazing animals
very
just running amok on our countryside.
They can help in some circumstances, though. That's what a new study have found, which we'll explain in just a second. In England, the government plans to increase the rate of tree planting to 30,000 hectares per year by spending £500 million over a 5-year period until 2025 to reach this target.
Yes, well, the government's environmental policy is relying on trees to deliver a raft of natural solutions to the climate crisis. Joining us on the line is Christian Dunn. In fact, here he is, right, there we are, in beautiful HD vision. Associate Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Sustainability, wetland scientist, and indeed a senior lecturer at Bangor University. Good morning. So, goodness me, bang goes the myth of grazing animals being a menace to our society.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, for so long we have thought about grazing animals as, this scourge of so much of our countryside, especially our uplands. Overgrazing has created these barren landscapes with no trees. This research is suggesting that a certain level of grazing is good. But to be honest, this is a good study, but it's well known that we need balance here. It's all about balance. Some of our landscape has been overgrazed for farming subsidy reasons and all sorts of reasons. That's very clear. But we do need grazing animals. They're absolutely an integral part of our landscape. I mean, if you even just look at some of our trees, hawthorn, for example, willow, these trees are used to being grazed. They're used to being trampled by animals. Grazing animals are not the enemy. It's just overgrazing. That's the issue. And so that's what this study's finding, that actually certain trees need a good level or a certain amount of grazing to cut down on some of the other plants, which could be over-dominate them. So it's common sense, really. It's balance. Everything in balance. This is ecology.
Yeah. Yes, and I've been convinced this morning by somebody in my team that there are rainforests in the UK, which I didn't think was true. But
I think someone's mugged you off there, man.
But is there? You can answer that question. Is there rainforests in the UK?
There most certainly are rainforests in the UK. Not on this issue. I'm not. No, because we think of rainforest. As soon as you say rainforest, you think tropical rainforest. You think orangutans. Brazil, all that kind of stuff. Tropical rainforest. But we also have temperate rainforests, and temperate is the British climate, and we do have temperate rainforests here. And to have a rainforest, you need a certain level of precipitation, certain amount of rain, and you also need to have plants which are capable of supporting epiphytes. Epiphytes are plants which grow on plants. And if you have that, then you have officially a rainforest. And we in the UK have rainforests, temperate rainforests. They used to cover about 5 to 10% of the land in the UK. But now with climate change, although I'm sure you're now going to blast me with climate change issues, but because of climate change and also habitat changes and destruction, this area has been massively reduced. And we now only have pockets of these temperate rainforests around the UK, generally on the west coast of Britain, where it is obviously a little bit wetter.
Good stuff. Well, hey, look, you know what? I thought only a madman would say that there were rainforests in the UK, but I stand corrected, so thank you very much.
I wish all my lecturers back in my university days were as charismatic as you.
Yes, it's true.
I don't think my students think that at all, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so it's that guy off the telly again. Anyway, all right, Christian, thank you very, very much. Christian Dill, Associate Pro Vice-Chancellor for Sustainability, Wetland Science and Senior Lecturer at Bangor University. You're absolutely spot on, by the way, because when I did my law degree, badly. Well, actually, no, I did all right, but I can't believe I passed that, really. It's a damning indictment of the legal profession. But I ended up, for the second term, never seeing any of my professors or classmates. They didn't even turn their camera on during the lectures.
Really?
Yeah, 10 grand that cost me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Oh, that's all right. I'd be more sorry if you ever have to represent in court, but anyway.
Yeah, let's hope that never happens. Let's go to some of your views to end the show. Lots of you getting in touch. Mark says, why is Johnson always shown in high-vis and hard hat? Yeah. Is this the equivalent of Putin macho posturing? And then lots of other people have got in touch saying, it's health and safety. You have to wear a hard hat and high-vis when you're on a building site. So that's why.
Yeah, he's doing his George Osborne impression, isn't he, that guy? He was always in high-vis. In fact, so much so that I think, didn't Theresa May present him with a high-vis jacket when she was presenting the awards? I think it was the Spectators do or something.
Really?
And she presented him with a high-vis jacket, which I thought was a nice touch, actually. But anyway, right, yes, lots of you have been getting in touch, of course, about, well, frankly, everything that we've been speaking about the the jab mandates potentially being dropped, of course, for doctors and for care workers as well. It's been a long time coming. It's the right decision, and that is from Doreen. There aren't enough Doreens in the world.
I suppose so. It's not something I've ever thought about necessarily. But listen to this. Alan disagrees with you quite strongly. You said earlier that you wouldn't care at all. You wouldn't care at all if whoever's treating you, if whoever's treating you has had the jab or they haven't. Well, Alan says, I will refuse treatment from anyone not vaccinated, no matter what. Well, he thinks we're anti-vaccine. We're not anti-vaccine. You're not anti-vaccine.
Not at all, no. For someone who's anti-vaccine, it would be astonishing for people to know that I've had 2 of them. But Booster jab's another one, but we'll have to wait and see about that. But no, I mean, you crack on, Alan. I mean, we'll see what you're saying when you're in cardiac arrest.
That's quite, a strong view. Jones says, I'm appalled by this idea. We spoke a bit earlier to our Culture and Social Affairs editor in Naya Valarian Iman about Brighton and Hove City Council basically having this new anti-racism training for teachers and telling children as young as 7 that they're not racially innocent, sort of teaching them about white privilege and things. Jones says, I'm appalled by this idea of telling young white children they're inherently racist. It will end up with children mixing with other children with the same ethnicity and increase racism. So she's saying it will basically lead to further isolation.
It highlights stuff. Well, you touched on it earlier about your daughter as well at school. You know, I dare say that most 5, 6, 7-year-olds or whatever aren't really looking at race or really thinking about it.
They're not at all. And it's only, I think, you know, children pick things up from home. So I think it would be quite easy to identify children who are genuinely racist, which I would assume is quite few, because they'd be coming out with things a 5 or 6-year-old would never come up with on their own.
But normally they've heard it from their parents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just think the average 5 or 6, 7-year-old, they're not going to be thinking about ethnicity and race
and then you
racism,
highlight it, and
then suddenly it's a thing. Yeah, that's the counterintuitive nature of it. But that is it from us here at To The Point. Don't go away, though, because up next is a briefing with Darren McCaffrey. Lots of political news today, of course, with that Sue Gray report. So stay with us for that. But first, the weather.
Hello again. Storm Corrie is clearing away, but it's still windy out there. Cold wind as well, slowly easing through the day. Sunny spells for many, certainly in the east. A few showers in the west. There is that storm system that brought the damage across Scotland overnight. The low pressure heading away, but bringing some very strong winds to Germany and Belgium today. Behind it, the isobars slowly opening up, but as I said, still quite a cold and brisk wind blowing out there, and blowing showers into Wales, west and north of Scotland. Some patchy rain coming into the west of Northern Ireland as well. Elsewhere, most places dry, just 1 or 2 showers in southwest England, and many eastern areas dry, fine and sunny. But it is cold, and it feels especially cold in the east where the winds are stronger. It feels